The question they can ask themselves is, why do I do what I do? And how is that different from someone else?
Mm.
And that process is a deep reflective one. If it doesn't hurt, I'm gonna use the metaphorical term hurt. If it doesn't hurt, if it's not an effort, you're not going deep enough.
Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. My name is Megan Garmers. I'm with the Bridal Masterclass, and tonight on our live, we're going to have Don Mamone come on and talk about branding. I think one of the things that can be really confusing or overwhelming for a lot of people when talking about branding, it's like, well, I kind of have a brand already, or I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh, here's Don right now. And I think that, getting some clarity into is that that you want your brand to say about you and what you want people to take away from when they see your brand, what that means. That's really, really important. And let's see here. Can we get, oh, there we go. Don, did you get the invite?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, but we
Why?
can't see you.
I don't know why. I'm getting the spinning circle of, oh wait, did it work?
I don't see you. Um, why don't you, let's see. That's
Oh,
crazy.
wait.
Ah, there we go.
Okay, let me flip the camera. Ah, here I am.
I love it.
Let's get my background better. There we go.
I love it.
Hi.
I love it. Well, welcome to our live.
I'm so excited. It's my
Well,
first ever Instagram live.
I love it. Well, we get a lot of people who are like, I'm not exactly sure how I'm doing this, if I'm doing this right, and that's the beauty of social media is, you know what, nothing on it is perfect.
No,
So
we're just
do
gonna
our best.
show up. Here we are.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, why don't you start out and tell people a little bit about yourself and kind of how you came to have this, this expertise in branding.
Yeah, so well, expertise, man, setting the bar really high already. Yeah, listen, I'm a hospitality survivor. I'm a photographer. I'm also an entrepreneur. And so my wife and I 15 years ago started a photography studio. It did pretty well, then it did really well, then it seemingly did amazingly well, right up until 2020 hit, like most of us in the events industry. So live events got us sidelined, and I really wanted to stay productive. So I started a community, essentially, is where really the grassroots of it were. There were a lot of people in the live events industry that were hurting. They were hurting bad. If they were part of the career-driven professionals crowd, they were furloughed or laid off in a lot of cases. If they were artists and entrepreneurs like me, they were scaling back, scaling down, closing businesses, which is the hardest part to think about. And so we created a community, and then I really wanted to serve. About halfway through the year, the thing that was really fun and exciting about it was people started to see that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And
Hmm.
I wanted to encourage people to focus on what happens when. And the when part of that is events come back with a vengeance because we all know
Right.
that's going to happen. The live events industry has literally been a champagne cork that has been shaken up and corked for too long. And so
Right.
I feel like when it pops, it's going to pop big time.
Okay.
So I started a brand basically now, and I serve creative entrepreneurs, and I want to teach them how to revolutionize their business by creating and building a brand that's a legacy brand and that is going to attract their dream client for life. And so much of that has to do with branding.
I love that. That's fantastic. I just see Morris join. It says always a pleasure to tune in. Thanks for joining, Morris. And Christy from Calligraphy by CT from Chicago just
Hi,
joined.
it's
Um,
Chi-Town.
that's great. So that's fantastic. I love that. And I think
Thanks.
it's, there's so many things that, crazy things obviously that have come out of the last almost year and a half now.
Yep.
But so many good things, so many really innovative, fantastic community building, heartwarming things. And I think those are things that if we can, not to ignore the things that have been horrible and heart-wrenching, but if we can focus on the things that have been good that have come out of 2020 and what we're moving towards for the rest
Yeah.
of this I think that's a really great kind of goal to have. And I think really focusing on your business, especially at this point that now that the end is kind of in sight, figuring out what it is that you need to do to make sure that your brand is on point with where you want to be. Because a lot of people are really kind of rethinking how they're doing their businesses, who they're serving, their ideal client avatars, all of that. So I think it's really important to make sure that people kind of take this time and really think again about, okay, is this what I still want to do, and who am I really serving now? How have they changed? So when it comes to branding, what's one thing that you think people always it's super easy to like screw up? Because I think we all do, huge screw ups.
Yeah,
When it comes to branding, what's the one thing that you're always like, oh, it's like a common mistake?
it's a journey for sure. I think I'm going to give you 1.5 because they're really,
Okay.
really well linked. You asked for one, and so I'm going to try to restrict it, even though it feels like there's so many things. But the one thing is they oftentimes confuse brand with branding. Okay, a brand is something that you can in fact create, and you have. It's an icon, it's a color theory, it's a concept. The process of branding is a verb. It's something that you have to go through, and the biggest mistake we make is people don't dig deep enough. They don't create a brand that is rooted in a uniqueness that is an irrefutably owned aspect of yourself and your business that renders your competition irrelevant. I'm going to say it again. If you brand correctly and you go through the process correctly, you will find what it is that's unique about you and your business that will 100% render your competition irrelevant.
I love that, because I think that's really something that even obviously before the pandemic, a lot of people were really frustrated about standing out, in the sea of competition and understanding, what is it that, I feel like everybody's trying to undercut me, or, they're all doing the same thing, and how do I stand out? But I think what you just said is so key, because, when it comes to competition, if you are able to really understand your unique value that you're bringing,
Mm-hmm.
no one else can bring that. It's unique. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and so I was just writing some stuff for a workshop that I'm going to do next week, and I've reflected on myself and the experience that my wife and I had years ago. We were just any other photography team. We were great, we were good at it, and people, oftentimes recommend and refer to us. But the problem is when you are what you do, I'm going to say it again, when you are what you do, as opposed to are who you are, and you bring that to what you do, people are like, oh, you're great, and you do this great, and you do that great. But they typically then will start comparing you. And you said this earlier, in a sense, they compare based on price. It's the most easily understood, most common variable that a client can say, well, you guys all do really great stuff, but you're 10% cheaper. I'm going to go with you. And what is that? That's a race to the bottom. And so
Right.
back in the day, and so when we started to unearth this and we started to unleash this in ourselves, we went from being just any other photographer to becoming the Mamones, which is the name of our brand. And we became a unique offering in the marketplace, and our clients and our professional partners started to truly appreciate what that was. And then instead of saying, hire one of these photographers, we're humbled to say, they would say, yeah, so you think you need a photographer, but what you really need are the Mamones. Go see them. They're going to take care of you. And that's where the gold is. That's where the traction happens.
I love that. And so if someone is trying to figure out, okay, how do I find what's unique about me? What's
Mm-hmm.
one way, DJ Mario just said so true. What's one way that they can kind of dig deeper? I mean, I think, obviously, kind of starting at the top, they're thinking, okay, this is my category, this is the talent I bring. Maybe
Yep.
this is my kind of approach to it that makes it different. But
Yep.
what are some of those things that they should think about that are oftentimes just like glossed over?
So the question they should ask themselves, and again, it's like 1.5 things that they can do.
Yeah.
The question they can ask themselves is, why do I do what I do, and how is that different from someone else?
Mm.
And that process is a deep reflective one. If it doesn't hurt, I'm gonna use the metaphorical term hurt. If it doesn't hurt, if it's not an effort, you're not going deep enough. Okay.
Mm.
And then you ask yourself, the second part of that question is, can my competition say the same thing?
Mm.
And if your answer is yes, your competition can, then you didn't dig deep enough, right? So
Interesting.
my example of that is in my photography career, we went from doing a lot of social weddings and milestones and things like that to becoming 100% corporate and nonprofit. one of the main driving reasons there was I was a corporate and nonprofit planner for 10 years at the hotel level. So I was the director of events for hotels throughout Southern California. And you better believe when a photographer tells a corporate event planner something to the effect of, oh, you're 6 months out, you're planning your photography, you're getting really into the nitty gritty. I'm so excited to hear more about what your agenda looks like and how I can be your partner. In fact, it really brings me back to when I was a corporate event planner for hotels, and they go, I'm sorry, what? You understand the world in which I live. And so when it comes down to competing with somebody else, they're like, this photographer's great, and so are they, and this photographer does this, and so do they. This photographer was a planner for 10 years. I'm going to hire them because I think I'm going to have a photography partner, but also somebody that understands what I'm going through. Boom. Differentiation. Competition is now irrelevant. I hopefully am wanting a one-person race, and they're going to want us to work with them.
Yeah. I love that. So thinking about what you bring to the table, that's totally different, totally unique.
Yep.
And that has to do with you personally. I
Yep.
mean, I think because, just like you said, sometimes it's easy to think about, okay, well, I do this and I do it really well.
Yep.
Like super well. And people are like,
yeah.
okay.
Well, you know what's funny about that too, is it's also your origin story. So when I said, why do you do what you do? Let me ask you, as a planner and somebody in the bridal world, have you ever heard anybody say, well, I'm a wedding photographer because I love love. I'm so romantic, right?
Right.
So I had this really amazing experience where I was helping a client try to figure out their why. And I said, what's your why? Why are you a wedding photographer? I love love. Okay, you and every other wedding photographer. What else? Well, I've just always been really, really romantic. Okay, great. Why? And all this thing. The Reader's Digest of this, which is hard to do because it was such a wonderful experience. She was a person of faith. Her Sundays for her entire upbringing were at like Mima and Papa's house. And everything about that was safe and comfortable and warm and loving. And she would watch this matriarch and patriarch walk hand in hand. And that was about the happiness in her childhood. And so when she reflected back on why am I a wedding photographer, it was, I love thinking about the fact that I can be a part of that day for those people, the inception of that relationship that will be a 50-year journey. She tells that story to bride and grooms now. How many of them do you think oh my God, that's such a unique story. That's so wonderful. They connect and all of a sudden they're the front runner. They're the leader that says, I want you to be a part of my wedding day. So it's that origin story too that can be incredibly unique.
That's fantastic. And it's powerful. I think sometimes, it's easy for us to think, okay, well, how can I pare that down? And I need to keep, kind of simplifying it, which is great. But at the same time, if you don't have that story, which is more than like 3 words, right?
Sure.
It's lost because it sounds really rehearsed and, kind of like out of a box and everyone else says it.
Yeah.
How is that any different? And oftentimes it's not, just like you said. But if you have that story of, okay, this is why, and obviously not like a 5-hour long story.
Yeah. You can be very unique and specialized. And I think I'm going to be a little cynical. I'm very, very rarely cynical, but the words authentic and genuine, I think kind of get overplayed. And I don't think people really take to heart what that means. It means having, a 2 or 3 minute origin story that's unbelievably authentic and genuine and that the bride and groom can relate to, or your client or whoever, whatever your ideal client avatar is, as you said, is. How do they relate to what you're saying? It's important to have that. That's how you make those connections.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know, obviously first your why and your origin story, and you have that down, it's hard then to really identify who your ideal client is within the mass of millennials and Gen Z, because at that point you love and your ideal client is anyone who's getting married, which is a big fat nothing.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Marketing to everyone is marketing to no one. And I think that we're really reluctant to niche down too far. And I certainly can understand that, but you should have to be willing to say no to money from a perspective of, if you recognize that this isn't my couple, this isn't my bride, this isn't my client, whatever the case is, you can't operate from a place of scarcity. You have to think that my client is out there. There's more of them. I'm going to spend all of my time and energy sending up my beacon and making sure people know this is who I'm here for, and let them come. And when they get there, you take care of them.
Absolutely. And the other part is doing enough research, because I feel like sometimes it's easy to just like create this random, imaginary person and say,
Yeah.
this is who's going to bring me all my money and all my success. And if you're living in the middle of nowhere and you're not willing to travel or do anything and you don't know how to use social media to attract, like, it's not going to work. You're like, what you're doing and what those services that you're providing, if that's not going to be able to be done within your geographic location, or the ability or inability to travel, then that's a problem. And I think that those are things that you have to really think about, because again, it's targeting, and with your brand, whoever it is that, that you have however it is that you've established your brand, and then what you're marketing that to, who you're marketing it to. Because that could be very confusing for a lot of people.
I definitely agree with you, and I think it's something that we're doing nowadays. And I think that I think as the pandemic gets behind us and the nourishment inside the industry goes up, this will fade a little bit. But I think right now, because of the constraint and everything that's happening, people are focused on client acquisition, client definition, and things. I really want people from time to time to shift back and take a step back and look at their audience in general,
Mm,
because the problem is when we start getting so laser focused on I need to find clients, you could be looking past people that need to hear your mission and message about your brand as well. Because for somebody like a planner, another photographer, another DJ or florist, or somebody else that's in your discipline or in your industry, they need to hear from you as well. And by doing that, you're going to uplift your brand. People are going to know who you are, what you stand for, who you want to serve, how you serve them, what makes you unique. All of a sudden, in addition to booking clients one-to-one, you're also creating referral engines and champions and community around, again, your brand identity. And then before you know it, like, you're not only booking direct, but other people are sending you referrals, and that flywheel starts to spin like crazy fast.
that's awesome. DJ Mario said, repeat that nugget: marketing to all is marketing to none. And that's so true.
Yeah.
It, because again, but when you think about, like, whether it's, Walmart or any big superstore type, big box store, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're dying. You go there are people, I mean, you go there, and there's going to be things that you get that at that specific store, because maybe you don't want to spend X amount of dollars on whatever, it's just some cheap something, or you need it right now, right? But if you have the time and energy to spend, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to be buying from that big store. You're buying from a place that you have a better experience. And especially coming out of 2020,
Mm-hmm.
those are things that, I mean, we all really value those interactions. And I think knowing that you're going to be purchasing and having that relationship, right? Even if it's like a 5-minute relationship, I mean, customer service is so important now, so much more than like 20 years ago. I mean, you can't
You
even, like, I
are,
mean, Twitter, like, forget it. Like,
yeah.
you're done.
You're 100% right. So two things that I just extracted from that brilliance. I mean, so much to extract, but the two things I picked up is, as a hospitality survivor, like back in the day, 25 years ago when I was in hospitality, it was big brand, big box, everything.
Yeah.
The Hilton, blah, 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 the Marriott, blah, 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 the Four Seasons, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the Four Seasons still does that a lot, but that's because they're a premium brand that everybody recognizes. But now you notice that everybody's doing these curated collections of things, right?
Mm,
The curio collection buy, the autograph collection buy. And that's because they recognize that their users, their end users, their guests, they want like the bespoke,
mm.
custom, this is a small boutique hotel that's going to listen to me, and they're going to appreciate me, and they're going to have a great experience. So that's one thing that's changed. And you're entirely right. Customer experience, when I think about how people are going to attract their ideal customer, branding is one element, but branding is basically the identity, right? And if you don't have marketing, that's like planting your flag in the ground and walking away and never saying anything about it, right? So marketing, you have to talk about your brand. Sales alignment means you figure out how it is that I'm going to benefit this person. What's the alignment of my value proposition and what you want? And the last one that's so important that you just picked up on is customer experiences. If we're not being proactive versus reactive, if we're not aiming to exceed expectations as opposed to just meeting them, not even in the game, not even in the
Yeah.
game anymore.
Absolutely. And like, one example, which I thought was really interesting. So for our bridal masterclass experiences, the in-person event, the first one of 2020 was in Philly, and we one of our hotel sponsor was the Notary Hotel in Philly,
Hmm.
which is an autograph collection.
Yeah.
And they took us through the most amazing, like how they check you in and the whole like lobby and how it was set up. And they gave us this whole tour and like down to like the drinks they had on their menu and the restaurant and like all these like curate. It was so amazing. Like it was so cool. And
Yeah.
it was one of the things that it's like, why would you ever not want to, if you were in Philly, why would you not want to go back there?
Hmm.
Um, and those are the things that, like you go to a Courtyard Marriott or even a Four Seasons, like, it's like, okay, to expect you're in, you're out, you're dead. Like there's not that like, ooh, I love that. That was it was meaningful. Like it really meant something and it
Yeah.
added to the memories of, I mean, because people are generally staying in hotels because they don't live there. So
I
they're trying to create memories. So if you're
totally.
try to create more memories and make it more meaningful, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, and the world we live in right now, I think, is moving largely away from, or at least trying to minimize the amount of transactional things that we're doing in our life. And right now, the commodity in
Yeah.
branding and marketing that's of the most importance amongst most is trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why you see a lot of people going back to older and more established names when they're looking at marketing and looking at buying. And so if we're in the business of, sort of rubber stamping to check somebody in and making it efficient. I mean, of course, you want to check in with a certain level of expedience, but at the same time, if once again, you're not creating an environment that speaks to, I'm not processing you, you're not being processed, you're being welcomed, right? Our language matters. When you're
Yeah.
doing branding and you're talking about experience creation, think through your words. Are you welcoming somebody? Are you checking them in? Or like, how are you doing things? We're going to see a steep increase in that because now everything's about getting your fair share of the market and doing
Mm-hmm.
so responsibly, attracting your dream client, making sure once you get them that you handle them responsibly and with great care, and making sure that you continue to grow that because the marketplace is going to grow. It just is. I mean, events are coming back. So you just want to make sure you get your fair share of the market or maybe just a little bit extra. And then from there, your brand explodes and it becomes again that flywheel because ultimately we know all the sayings. It's easier to sell to a client that's already our client. It's easier to keep a client than it is to get a new client. So you want all those things working in tandem.
Yes, absolutely. And so what would you say for people who are rebranding? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
rebranding is a very popular topic idea that a lot of people have taken this time to kind of think about, okay, well, I started my company X number of years ago, and so I want to rebrand it. What are some things to remember when you're rebranding your existing company?
So I have some thoughts on the noun branding, but I probably spend most of my time on the verb branding, right? And I'm just going to tell you a quick anecdote. Part of the branding topic came from a keynote that I did. And for those of you who don't know, I'm out in Dallas, Texas. I did a keynote called Branding is for More Than Just Cattle. And the reason I talked about it was because I kind of pulled at the origin of what this concept was. And when you think about why we used to brand in a country back in the turn of the century, it was to identify and create ownership of your possession, your cattle, right? So that when they got out or when you were moving them on trails, you were like, that one's mine and that was mine and that one's mine. And so that's the noun, right? That's the branding iron part of branding. Your logo, your colors, your fonts, your typography. You got to be stylish. You got to be fresh. It's got to be personable to you, but it's got to be relatable to your client. Stay away from fads. Like work with a true branding, like expert that's going to pull all that stuff out of you, right? But when it comes to the verb branding, even when you rebrand, it's about taking stock in you. Where have you been? Where are you going? What market do you serve, right? All of that comes into play. I do think sometimes people think that they're going to solve their business problems with a fresh new look, and that's another problem, right? If you're having trouble and you're looking to revolutionize your business, you've got to look at your brand and your branding and all that stuff, but you have to be willing to accept that unfortunately the operation isn't effective. The conversion rate isn't there. Why am I not converting? So you have to establish what the actual problems are and what the root causes are, because I think unfortunately people are treating symptoms. Sometimes they're like, I'm just gonna do a rebrand. fresh new brand that's going to solve all my problems, and that's not the case either. So my number one piece of advice is don't do it alone. Don't try to do it alone. Find somebody that's an objective third party that's an expert at these things. Reach out to them and have them guide you down that path.
I love that. I love that. It's like a Dateline. Don't watch alone,
That's
right?
it. Yes, friends
Don't.
don't let friends rebrand poorly.
And I think those are things that sometimes I think we also, it's not that I don't think forget's the right word, but I think sometimes if you're an established business, sometimes you don't want to ask for help
Mm-hmm.
from somebody else. Maybe you think it's going to make you seem like you don't know what you're doing, or maybe you don't want to hear the negative feedback or constructive criticism. But being open to that, I mean, the whole point is that if you're refreshing, rebranding, whatever it is, you're doing it again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Trying to get all of that additional information is only going to be helpful for you. So
You got to be willing to ask the tough questions and hear the tough answers. And that's sometimes why it's better for other people to help you through that, is to find somebody that you can trust, get to know them, establish a bond and a relationship, and then ask those hard questions. And again, that's where we don't make transitions and create great things in our comfort zone. We don't.
yeah,
Things come from adversity. Things come from the hard. So when you ask those hard questions and you get those challenging answers and that constructive feedback, it's from that is the birthplace and the genesis of your next great thing, not the other way
absolutely.
around.
Absolutely. I remember a client I had a while ago, and we were talking about her logo,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was asking her some questions, and she was saying all of her favorite brands and what those meant to her. And then I said, okay, so if you saw your logo next to a Chanel bag, does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because she loves Chanel. And I was like, does that make sense to you? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so if we replace the Chanel logo with your logo, that's going to make sense to you. She's like, no.
Mm-mm.
And I'm like, so then you need to think about why that is, because you can't say, and again, just being comfortable, like, oh, this is my logo. This is my brand. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm used to. This is what I've built. But if it's not exemplifying who you are and what you want to put out there, that's the whole point of rebranding, is to change it. Like, it's
Yeah.
sometimes easy to kind of hold tight to it because it's your security blanket. It's what you've always had.
So I got to tell you, what you made me just think of is I have something that we in our business, and now as a coach and as a consultant, as a strategist, I use this all the time. I tell people that if your business doesn't have the Maya Angelou effect, then you're falling short. And the
Mm,
Maya Angelou effect goes back to her famous quote, and that's, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. If you don't feel something for your brand,
yeah.
who else is gonna? So that is probably a great question to ask yourself. And maybe at that point, it's time to rebrand or to change things. Or as you are already in the process of branding, when somebody shows you something, if you don't have sort of a visceral, emotional response to it, then you probably got to keep working. And I'll tell you, my wife and I, we've been through one complete and total rebrand. We've been through now the launch of a new brand, and that was in the last 12 months. Every time I see our logo, our color theory, our fonts, anytime I see it sponsored because we're photographing an event for a charity or something, I get so excited. I love everything about our brand. And so that is a great barometer. It's a great measuring stick for people to be like, my brand's on point, because I get super happy every time I see it.
I love it. I love it. And understanding that you loving it isn't just about seeing your name in lights or seeing
Mm-mm.
the brand, like, oh, I made this is mine. Or and sometimes I think it gets confused because
Yeah.
people are, oh, that's my company, or oh, they feel very, very excited and proud, and they should be proud that they have
Yep.
their business. But understand that emotional connection that you have, whether it's to the name or to the font or the logo or whatever the colors, understand that in and of itself might not be what everyone else sees. They don't see, and feel the pride in your
Right.
business. They didn't
Yeah.
create it.
No, but they can have an emotional connection. And you make such a great point, right? It has to be both sides of that coin. So you have to be proud of it. It has to make you excited because of the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears, the ownership, all that type of thing. But it has to resonate with your audience. And it's so fun because when I was working on the rebrand for our photography business, and we knew we were going to be doing social, but also corporate and nonprofit and things, I had this vision in my head, and I love Miss Citrus Modern and all this kind of stuff. And the branding architect that helped me build it looked at me, and he's so talented, and he said, listen, I want this to be equal parts you and the person that you're going to be speaking to. And I can tell you that this doesn't represent your target audience in full, right? This may speak to a corporate planner, but this is not going to speak to somebody in the social market. And I kind of was like grumpy about it a little bit because I was so excited, but I was like, thank you for that constructive feedback. And we went back at it and we dug a little deeper. And the one that he came up with, I was like, I literally couldn't love it more. And so be open to that. And you're 100% right. It has to be equal parts you and your ideal client.
And I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, that feeling, like that's a natural feeling, like to have that, you know, because you put that, you know, all those blood, you know, the long nights, the blood, sweat, and tears, you've put that all into your business, so you have an emotional connection. It's like someone, you know, insulting your child.
Totally. Like
like, what do you mean my child's ugly?
And there's again, all those words, they mean so much, and you have to choose them wisely, right? So if you're working with somebody who's destructive or manipulative, or like, then you can be keenly aware of that. But I would be willing to bet that a vast majority of the times, the people that are going to offer you feedback, they're trying to be constructive and not destructive. They're there to try to help you, and you have to then use that as motivation to say, okay, great, thanks for the challenge. I can do better, be better, create better, and then just attack it. And then you'll know, like, you'll feel it. You like, that's the one. That's the one right there.
That's right. I also like to say, like, you can put, you know, use like a Google Sheets or a Google form, right? And you can actually have people, you know, fill it out anonymously. So maybe you don't have that reaction in front of them.
Yeah.
Or, you know, what do you think of these things, or like these options, or, you know, what does this make you feel like? Or when you see my logo, what does this mean? Like, there's a lot of ways that you can gather information without, if you're really sensitive like that, without necessarily having it all, you know, spelled out, like this person said that you suck and this person said that you're, you know, but, you know, like, not the names necessarily, but then you get all of the data, and you can then look at it as data.
It'll probably be more constructive too, because the people will be willing to share without fear of like, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? I 100% think whatever tactic works for you, it's just so important to reach out to and get that person's feedback and be willing to take it with full faith and effort that they're trying to benefit you.
Yes. And so when it comes to moving that over to their social media and their website and their Facebook, what are some things that, again, okay, more than one, let's go with five and a half.
5.5
things that that people make mistakes, like very common mistakes when it comes to like moving, you know, kind of that feel to social media.
The one thing that's so hard for folks is, and we're in a world now where everybody is their own broadcast studio. So back in the day, we didn't have this pressure and this feeling of I have to publish, right? And so I will say, let's start sort of at the top of the hierarchy, and that's your ultimate goal is to attract your dream client, right? I mean, that is definitely the goal of a business, is to fill your funnel with the most ideal client that you can be of the most assistance to, that's going to see you as an investment and not an expense, right? But before we get there, we have to think about, okay, I am now going to be shouting into the ether, right? I'm putting this out for all of social media to see. How do I make sure that I'm starting that process of curating an audience of people that want to hear from me? Well, you have to be true to your voice, right? So the first thing you have to do is find your voice. And I think a lot of times people are like, how should this sound? How should I say this? The way you should say it and how it should sound is exactly how you would say it and exactly how you would sound. So it's really interesting how people feel like if they're maybe they're a little bit more sort of straight-laced and a little bit more corporate-y, and then they go online and they try to be like super cute and whimsical. And then what happens is somebody that really appreciates super cute and whimsical is like, oh, that's fun. And then they engage with you and they're like, why are you so square now? What happened? Like, why? There's a misalignment. And so you need to be the most genuine form of yourself, right? When you're doing these things. And that's about finding your voice, owning it, and then using it. And there's all kinds of practices and processes we can go through, right? What words would you describe yourself? Ask 10 of your friends, what words did you use to describe me? And so on. And you work your way down. I think the next one is consistency, right? Like, I think that people feel like sometimes they have to post just to post. And I think there's nothing worse in the world than just forcing yourself to put something out there that has very little value or will create very little emotion in others. And so I would say whatever your minimum viable sort of consistency is, to say, I'm going to produce content that is valuable. That's the next thing. And then one of the things that I just talked about that I think is so important that people completely miss is when you market, you're talking to everybody in your audience. You're not just talking to your client, okay? And here's what that looks like. Today's post, as a photographer, let's say, today's post is an event that I photographed, and I'm gonna lift up the planner and talk about how amazing their work was and the venue and a few other people. The next post is about how I captured a portrait. Now I'm speaking to maybe another photographer. And that might be for a number of reasons. Maybe you offered a business-to-business service. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just hire other associate photographers all the time, and you want to know if that person's gonna engage with you. Maybe it's that you're looking for referral sources. And so you're sending out how you do your work and how you run your brand so that somebody out there is full to capacity and says, oh, you know what? I can't take that day because I'm completely full to capacity. Call Don and Emily. They're amazing, right? So you can literally fill your hopper of content by not being myopic and super laser focused. Every post I'm trying to acquire a client. It can be so much more broad spectrum than that. And then the last thing, which I can't get into too much detail with because it's not my superpower, but I know and understand the importance of it, and that's copy. I think people just sit down and they just try to pound out stuff on a keyboard and they're like, okay, I put words on pages. And that's very difficult. Writing copy effectively, and you can be very focused on quality over quantity. I'll tell you, in 15 years of running a photography business, I can tell you people don't read as much as you think they do. For 15 years in the social market, especially, we would meet with bride and grooms and they'd be like, your stuff's amazing. And we've heard awesome stuff about you. And we looked at all your photos and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to talking, they're like, oh, you guys are married? And we're like, yeah, it's like 100 places on our website talks about that we're a husband and wife. And I think it's just, they hear from other people you do great things. They look at your photos. So I think that you can be intelligent and you can be focused on quality over quantity when it comes to copywriting. But please, oh please, when you find your voice and you start sharing your message in writing, make sure that you invest in and or look to people to help you with making sure you're writing great copy on your posts, captions, and things.
I love that. And understand that there are different ways, I mean, in kind of approaches when it comes to social media and copy. There's obviously like the long form, almost like a mini blog. And then there's a quote and maybe some hashtags and that's it. And then there's some like kind of medium and maybe it asks a question and it wants you to engage. Like there's different ways of approaching it. It's all based on what you're going to be doing with your social media account. Like, are you trying to attract people with it or is it more of a portfolio? But either way, I think it's important to make sure that your copy says it, to be extra cheesy, says something.
It should say something. And it should be well written and it should be like engaging. And you just pointed out something that's so huge that we hadn't touched on yet, and that's that the metric that you're using to measure your success is of critical importance, right? So if having 10,000 followers on Instagram is your goal, you're going to probably run your Instagram account in a certain way. If it's to be a portfolio so that when your relationship marketing works and everybody's like, oh my gosh, you should call these people, they're great. And they're like, I'm just going to go check out their Instagram. And you want what the nice things people said about you to resonate and to be seen on your Instagram, then you're going to run your account differently. So you just brought up a great point, and that's know what your goal is or your metric and then run your account accordingly.
I love that. Yeah. And understanding that it's okay. Like you don't have to do everything just like somebody, just because you want 10K and somebody else has 10K doesn't mean that you have to do everything the same way that they're doing their, social media either. And your brand, your business and everything that it stands for might be something totally different. And so that's also okay. Like you can have two very different brands and have them the same goal per se, or even the same ideal client, but be running their businesses differently.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. I think sometimes people are afraid to do something a little differently because they see someone else have success and they're like, ooh, so that must be the exact roadmap that I have to also do to get what they have.
I try to tell every client I work with, everybody that's in my coaching program, they hear this frequently. Okay. We're all running a race. We are all trying to succeed, but you should not be running a race based on seeing who comes across the finish line first. The race you're running is against you yesterday. Every single day, you should wake up, lace up your shoes, pound the pavement to set a new personal record. I don't care how fast the person in the lane next to me is running. I don't know anything about them. I really don't. I don't know if they started before me. I don't know if they're doing performance enhancing drugs. I don't know anything about them. Nothing. The only person that I know with full faith and effort is myself and how hard I'm trying. And so everything you evaluate every single day can be, did I get up this morning? Did I stretch? Did I put my shoes on? Did I put the reps in? Did I practice? Okay, now I'm gonna clock myself. Today wasn't my best record. Today wasn't my best day. Tomorrow I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do better and I'm gonna set that personal record. I swear, if you just focus on that, when you think about what's going on in the fish bowl that is the world in which we live now, it will change a mindset in you because you can look over and be like, awesome, I'm so glad you're running that fast. Congratulations. I hope you hit your personal record. I'm going to be over here setting mine. It will change your whole perspective.
Absolutely. And social media, especially when that's the topic of whatever your goal is, it's even harder, I think, sometimes for people to not look over and be like, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing this right? I have no idea.
And
But
they may not, they probably don't either, you know? They may look like they do, but you have no idea what's going on over there.
absolutely. I love that. So, I mean, and thinking about, okay, so if this is what I'm doing and I'm still not getting the results, that's like, with your metaphor, it's like, okay, so if I'm running a race and maybe my form is bad, maybe I need a running coach, maybe I need different shoes, maybe I need to try a different path because, like I chose like an incline and I should try something maybe a little less hilly to start.
Yeah.
you know there's different things that you need to assess based on how you're doing instead of just like beating yourself up, and then it's easy at that point to compare and be like, well, why can they run that?
It's so funny that you say that because I think it's just a chronic expectation of entrepreneurship for most of us or many of us that being an entrepreneur is like, I own my own business, which
Mm.
means I'm out here on my own. And unfortunately, they suffer for years and they struggle for years. I was one of them. I didn't hire a coach or engage in somebody to make a better business out of my business until not too long ago. And so I've been out there shouting from the hilltops. Literally, guys, it doesn't have to be this hard. There are people that have carved the paths in the mountainside that we can now walk with them and they'll help us. That doesn't mean they have all the answers. It doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do it for us. You still have to put in the work, but they just might be able to make it a little bit easier by, like you said, giving you the tools, the training, and the things that you need to succeed. And I will say that there is one common element, since we were sort of focused on social media, and that's that it comes back to the word transactional.
Mm.
If you're in the events industry, if you're a creative entrepreneur, odds are you're in a very high touch industry. And the struggle with social media is it's very transactional, right? And I joke around and I say, I want to start a huge campaign to stop the double tap, because what happens is we get so used to like scrolling, oh, pretty picture, oh, sunset, oh, this person's having a baby, double tap, and you just keep scrolling. And you're like, wait a minute, that person just told me like their life is about to change and they're going to have a child, like literally bring biological material into the world and then have to raise it for 18 years and send it to college. And so we have to try to do the best job that we can, that if we're going to spend time on social media, to be a little more intentional and bring a little bit of the three-dimensional world to the two-dimensional world. And I can tell you from my own experience, and you and I met on Clubhouse for the first time, Clubhouse is one of the ways that more intrinsically does that. It's your voice, it's your mission, your message, you're spending the time there live. And so it helps promote that. But as far as Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all those ones, I'm challenging everybody that's listening to be a little more intentional. And so sometime when you might have put a thumbs up to somebody's more thoughtful effort, write a comment, send them a direct message, tell them that you're excited, you're proud, you can't wait to hear. And or whatever the case is, to try to inject just a little bit more of that authenticity and that three-dimensional world into sort of a more transactional environment. I think that makes a big difference too.
That's important. And I like to challenge people to even go a little further and say, okay, only go on social media when you have the time to be intentional about specific things.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going on there for? Are you going on there to scroll? Are you going on there to engage? Are you going on there to post? What are you doing when you're
Mm-hmm.
going? Are you researching, researching your hashtags, researching other accounts? What are you doing when you're
Mm-hmm.
on there? Because anything done mindlessly is going to give you nothing.
You're 100% right. Like the motion that you're going through, there's very little reward to it. And I try to, again, remain positive. I'm not a cynic or a skeptic at heart, but when people are like, I just don't have time for such and such, I went, open up your phone, go to your settings, tell me how much time you spent on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And even if you just take 10 minutes from that to do
Yeah.
this other thing. So I think we could challenge ourselves to time track a little bit and be intentional. I 100% love that challenge. So thanks for fighting the good fight for all of us.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. You as well. And so, I mean, so many good things tonight about branding and brand and understanding kind of the easy things that we all make those very common mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that's really important when we're thinking about, okay, so who are we? Because it's really an identity issue.
Yeah, it is.
Because who are we as a person? Who are we as a brand, as a company, as a business? And then
Mm-hmm.
who are we in terms of what we're putting out there? Who are we marketing to? What are we trying to do? How are we trying to change the world? And those are things that, if you're not constantly asking yourself, and I always say, like, you should be rebranding almost on a daily basis, because those are things that you need to be aware of. Not that you're changing
Mm-mm.
your font and your logo every day, but that you're constantly thinking about, okay, am I meeting the needs of the people I'm trying to serve? Am I actually meeting the goals that I have for my company? Am I actually doing the things that I'm set out to do? Are people feeling the way, just like what you said? Are they feeling the way that I want them to feel? Because if they're not, you need to, quote unquote, rebrand and think about, what do I need to do differently to reach that goal? And
Totally.
so all of those things were so good. Kind of last thoughts that you want to leave everyone?
Well, I love that you just talked about sort of refining and recalibrating every day. I think that's so important, is to get into alignment and to evaluate what we're doing. One of the things that's hard that we haven't talked about is the fact that your brand, your marketing, your sales alignment, and all those things, they do come back to also the fact that they're a beacon, as I said earlier, but they're also a filter.
Mm.
And people struggle with that filter part. We touched on it briefly, but I guess I would drive that home. When you plant your flag in the ground and you say unabashedly and with confidence and enthusiasm, this is who I am, this is who I serve, this is how I serve them, this is my unique value proposition, all those things, right? You have to be willing to say that as people come closer to that beacon, they're like, oh, look, there's that person that does that thing. As they get closer, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to run towards it and be like, yes, finally, that person that does that thing in that way that I'm so excited about that I can't wait to get closer to. Or they're going to be like, I'm not here for it. Nope, don't like that. And they're either going to turn around or slip through the filter or whatever it is. And that's okay. It's really hard for people to understand that that's okay. But if you spend all of your time creating that beacon that is so perfectly aligned with you and who you're talking to, then you can spend every minute of your day revolutionizing a business that reaches that client. And so you're not wasting time. The thing I hear a lot from clients is, I'm getting great leads, tons of leads, volume of leads is great, but every single one of them is price resistant, or they want this, or they're asking if I'm a film photographer, or they want to know about my, where I get my flower, like all this stuff that became noise, instead of somebody coming to them that's like, hey, I need a photographer that does this, this, and this, and I know that about you and your brand, and so I'd really love to schedule a consult. And so it is about that beacon and that filter. Own it, 100%. Own it, own the brand, plant your flag on the ground, and everybody will come to you. And those that want to stick around, those that run closer, we used to tell brides every time, listen, as we wrap this consultation, we're going to send you all the information you need to make the best decision for you. if you're not going to run across a field of wildflowers and embrace your wedding photography team in a big hug, spinning around in a circle with that feeling of elation, then you have to keep looking. That's the type of passion that you should have when you're working with a brand, especially a high touch brand in the wedding and event market. So I leave you with that. Own it, love it, send it out for everybody to hear, and then find that ideal client and draw them in.
I love it. That's fantastic. Don, thank you so much.
It's been
And
a pleasure.
yes, absolutely. And tomorrow we're going to keep talking all about brand and branding, uh,
100%.
Clubhouse. So tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, we're going to chat more about this. Bring your questions. If you have tips of things that you've done that worked for you, we'd love to hear it as well. Florals by Celine, thank you so much for your time and advice, she says.
You are so welcome. And I have to say that, my DMs are open all the time. So please, if anybody's listening to this live or on a replay, if you guys have a question, if you want information, please feel free to send me a message. I answer all my DMs personally, and I'd be happy to help you out in any way I can.
I love it. Don, you're the best. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. We will chat tomorrow morning.
I look forward to seeing you then.
All right. Have a
Bye
great night,
now.
everyone.